Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Tammy, and this is part two, the conclusion of Tammy, because I messed up the video and getting the rest of it out the other day. So we're just going to add a new video and have her take over. Have her.
Okay.
You know what I want.
I'm ready. Yes. So where I left off at the other video, I was talking about the rape that I had went through with the two classmates. And what ended up happening is I went to school the next school year. So I was in 7th grade at that time. And when I got to school, I was just praying that this kid either did not go to my school or was not in my classroom at the time. And so I get to my first period class and I walk in, I go and sit down at a desk. I don't see him anywhere. And I'm sitting in my seat just thinking, I'm just so thankful. Hopefully he doesn't go to my school. Hopefully he's not going to be in any of my classes. So as soon as the bell rings, in walks this kid, and I was just so shocked. And he immediately scanned the room and saw me there and purposely sat in the desk right behind me. So as the teacher is starting her class, he starts scooting up in front of, from behind me, scooting up to my ear, and he starts whispering, "Help me, little boy, help me," and just basically mocking me from when I busted into that bedroom and just started grabbing at that little boy and begging him to help me. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to deal with that. And I just began to skip school every day. I didn't go to school unless I showed up there to just sleep in class because I didn't sleep the night before. I didn't go to school. I would get on my bus in the morning and the bus would bring us to school, and I would just walk right off campus until the end of the day, walk back on campus and ride the bus home. And I ended up getting straight F's on my report card for the whole school year of 7th grade, and again for 8th grade. I did the same thing because I still had to go to school with that kid.
You went to school but didn't stay at school, but then got back on the bus?
I would just walk right off campus. And the first day that I walked off campus, I walked in this neighborhood just looking for somewhere that I could possibly, spend the day at. And I ended up finding this abandoned house, and that's where I would go. Like I would just go to this abandoned house, and sometimes I would climb up into this tree and hang out up in this tree, because I knew that if I was up in a tree, nobody could see me up there, if they were looking for me for some reason or whatever. Sometimes I just hang out up in the tree. But there were multiple times that I would talk other kids into coming with me. So I would have like sometimes other girls with me. And but I was more alone than I was, with other kids, because they couldn't skip every single day like me. You know what I mean? I just didn't want to be alone. So I would talk these kids into coming with me.
I did the same thing. This is so weird because I did the same thing. And, like you got F's and I got bad grades too. But, I look back and why did anyone let my parents know I wasn't coming? Why was they giving me F's on? I wasn't doing any work. I wasn't there.
Yeah, I was very good at changing grades, and I was also very good at making sure I was getting the letters in the mailbox if they were sending any letters. And I also went through a period of time where if I felt like the school was going to call, we had one of those phones that hung up on like a jack on the wall in our kitchen. And I would pull the whole phone off, and I would cut wires inside the phone so that the phone didn't work. Like I thought, trust me, I thought of everything to avoid being caught in anything. And you know, because I was in survival mode, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, kids will do those things because of those reasons. And so I was able to hide it really, really well. And ultimately, I don't know if ultimately my parents figured out at some point. I really can't remember any of that stuff. All I know is that I wasn't going to go to school with my rapist, and that was all there is to it. I was not going to school with my rapist, and I couldn't tell anybody. You know, I couldn't tell on him.
I don't
And
think people don't understand that haven't been through that, what that feels like. Because, you know, after two
mhm,
guys tried raping me out in the field, I was spending the night with my sister one night, and then this guy
mhm,
rescues me. He hears me yelling for help. And then I run and get in the trailer where my sister's at, where she's having her party. And here comes the guy that rescued me, which is buddy to these guys who are raping me. And they're in the trailer, you know, the two rapists sit across from me in this trailer living room. I'm screaming
right.
like this wild animal, get them out of here. I have them sitting there looking at me after what just happened. I get them
Mhm.
out of here. And they told me I needed to calm down and settle down. I wasn't settling down. You know, you're in that fight mode, and you
There's
don't want to
nothing
see
like
their
that
face.
feeling. Right. There's nothing like that feeling of having to sit with your rapist, or there's just nothing like it.
And they taunt you.
Yep. Yep.
And you know,
Yep.
just
It
like him
was
saying that in your ear. You know, they're
mhm.
just like they're demons possessed. Like they
Mhm.
taunt. They want to play like a mouse or a cat playing with a mouse, you
Yeah,
know, while they're
that was
killing it.
exactly how it was. Yeah, that was exactly how it was. So it was my middle school was only seventh and eighth grade when I was a kid. Sixth grade was at still elementary school, but middle school was my worst time of school of my life because of that one reason. And it's like at the same time, like nobody really, you know, the school never questioned, you know, why is Tammy walking off school every day? You know, they just
Right.
automatically labeled me as some bad kid, but nobody wanted to know why I was walking off campus. You
We
know,
were
that didn't
just
matter.
not good enough. We're not good enough as the other kids.
Right,
We're just that
right,
trash over there. Who cares?
right. And I did appear, I appeared like a very homely kid. I mean, I will admit that. Like I never made friends through like elementary school. I had people that I knew, but they really didn't like me. Like I was a very homely looking kid. Like I think I showed you a picture of me when I was a kid. I can't remember now. It might have been my therapist. But my mom cut my hair off like a boy, and she dressed me in clothes where I was completely covered, you know, jeans and long sleeve shirts. I was covered all the way up to the neck, and where nobody was able to see, you know, the bruises on my body, the abuse, but I looked like an abused child. That's why kids didn't like me. I looked homely, you know what I mean? And
Everybody's
so I,
victim.
yeah, I was horribly bullied at school by most of the kids, so I just kind of stuck to myself, which was fine. But
People
so and
know, even kids know who they can bully and get by with. If
right,
teachers even
right,
feel like this kid isn't worth nothing, kids pick up on that. And they know this is
right,
one kid we're not going to get in trouble if we kick, hit, spit on,
right,
whatever.
right. Because even the teachers bullied me, so it wasn't like it was just the kids. The teachers did too. But so it things didn't change until my parents moved to the other coast of Florida, and then I was away from my rapist and away from everybody. But another thing that I wanted to say too, that I don't think people even recognize this or understand this, but when you're abused your whole entire life, you assume that that's normal. You just think that all the other kids are also going through that. You don't know it's abnormal. you know what I mean? So it's not a thought in your head. Like in my younger years, it wasn't even a thought in my head to expose it in any kind of a way because I thought it was normal. And the only
And we
reason
see
why.
other kids with more things and better lives, but we just
Mhm,
somehow know that's just not in the
mhm.
cards for us.
Right, right. There would be kids that looked like they were rich kids and stuff like that, but I assumed they were still being beat at home. You know what I
Right?
mean? And what changed that for me is I don't know why this specific day, but I focused on some news that was on the TV my parents was playing, and there was a toddler that it was on the news that the toddler had been turned upside down inside a toilet and beat, and its head was beat on the porcelain, and it ultimately drowned from the toilet water. And they were saying that this is child abuse and that this is wrong and this, that, and the other. And I remember looking at my stepfather and I said, that's when I came to the realization, you're abusing me. And like I said to my stepfather, I said, you're abusing me. I'm being abused. And he immediately looked at me like with these really angry eyes. And he was like, you think you're being abused? You want me to show you abuse? And he picked me up and he flipped me upside down by my feet and he brought me in the bathroom and he was hanging me over the toilet like how that news was just saying. And he was like, do you want to see abuse? Do you want to see abuse? And it was like, and I'm screaming like, no, 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 because I'm thinking I'm gonna die like that little toddler right now. You know what I mean? But before that, like I was so ignorant to what was happening to me. I knew that the abuse that my brother was doing to me, like in the younger years, like he stopped doing the molesting. I was probably around 6 years old. It was shortly after we had moved to the new house. And I don't know if it was because I was able to say no, 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 don't touch me anymore. I don't know why he stopped, but that type of abuse stopped with my brother. It just became a whole different type of abuse with my brother when it came to like sexual abuse. It was more of him trying to force me to be with other little boys sexually, and it's like he wanted to watch it, and he would be like threatening me, you need to do it right now, and it was just a horrible situation. But before that, before I realized what he was doing to us was abuse, like my stepfather would literally beat the living daylights out of me, like horribly beat the living daylights out of me. And 5 minutes later, I'd climb up in his lap and I'd say, I love you, daddy. I love you, because, and it was more of, I didn't want him to feel bad about what he just did to me. Like I had so much, you know, like I knew how hurt I was. I thought that it was hurting him just as much as it was hurting me. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that it was something bad, and like I said, I'd be in his lap and I'd be like, I love you, daddy. And then like 5 minutes later, he's beating the living daylights out of me again. You know what I mean? And it was like, it just all seemed normal. Like that's normal. That's supposed to normally be happening, but I had, in my younger days, I had such a forgiving heart because, like I said, like I was constantly communicating with God. And it was like, God was teaching me what was right and what was wrong, you know, and, I didn't, and forgiveness, that was one of the, and loving unconditionally, that was some of the main things. So it was like, I didn't realize that it wasn't normal, but at the same time, I didn't want my stepfather to feel horrible about what he just did to me. I didn't want him to feel any pain like the pain I was feeling. So after a few years though, well, more of after the rapes, that's when I became horribly, horribly angry. I just was a very, very angry person. And
Do that, don't they? They do that to you.
right. And but I was still, scared to death to tell on my parents and stuff like that because we had been threatened, you know, basically our whole life, that, you know, what happens at home stays at home kind of a deal. It wasn't those words that they used. It was more of every other swear word telling us to keep our mouths shut. But, you know,
I think
so,
a rape makes us, you're angry and you're fighting and you're offended,
mm,
and then when it's over, you're still angry and offended and fighting.
right, right. That just, it never goes away. I mean, it doesn't. And, so my spiritual experiences really woke up. I'm gonna jump out of my childhood right now, because there is, I literally could go on for 6 months through, you know, it's like an onion, you just keep peeling. I could go all the way back to 5 years old and tell you a whole nother section, and then keep going back from 5 years old up, you know, because it's the abuse just was nonstop, and it was never ending. So I could just, it would take up
Yeah, and
way
and
too
and,
much
and I would
time.
just want to say there, and that's why we don't talk too, is because we
Hmm.
could go on and on forever, and the memories are
Hmm.
still there, and people grow tired. People can't handle it. Like I said, I had nightmares after I
Hmm.
heard your story,
Right,
and um, it's too much, and we know it's too much.
right, right. I know personally what I went through is too much, and it's too much for somebody to just take on and handle. And
And like even me, like people just want to hear the beautiful spiritual experiences, the NDEs and stuff, and I get that. People don't want
mhm,
to hear the abuse. And when I wrote my book, I thought, who wants to hear this garbage? But then I
mhm,
realized I had to tell about that so they'd appreciate the good experiences, the
right,
miracles,
right.
how
So
God rescues us.
right, right. So I'm gonna fast forward, because I really believe that everything I had went through is what opened me up so much to the spiritual realm. And actually, I got to talk about one thing that happened to me as an adult, just because it ties into what happened to me, one of my most profound spiritual experiences. So my first husband, um my first husband freaked out one day and literally tried to kill me. Like I was 6 months pregnant for our daughter, and I met him when I was 19 years old. So I'm sure I was probably very psychologically messed up just coming out of the house that I was in.
Your
And
daughter was your first child?
no, my daughter was my first husband.
Because you
I
had
had a
the
daughter when
boy
I was a
already.
teenager. Yeah, I
How
had
old
a
was you when
daughter
you
when
had
I was a
him?
teenager, but this was my first husband. So,
Yeah,
and
but
we
how old
had a
was
daughter.
you? How old was you had your son?
I was I was 21 years old. I just gave birth to him right after my birthday at 21. But my
Okay.
first daughter, I was
Mhm.
17 when I got pregnant for her. And that was
Okay.
a boyfriend from high school.
Okay.
But and we never married. He was a horrible person, horribly, horribly, horribly abusive. And I was a easy target. I was fresh out of my home at that time. You know what I mean?
I get you.
Still in my home and still experiencing abuse, you know? But so my first husband freaked out one day and he literally tried to kill me. And I was 6 months pregnant for my daughter. Like he beat my head multiple times on the solid wood nightstand that was right next to our bed. Like I had multiple contusions all over my head, and then he choked me, telling me as he's choking me, "I'm going to kill you." And my 3-year-old was in the bed at the time, screaming, crying while his dad was doing this to me. And so I ended up he got arrested. I went to the hospital. They weren't able to do x-rays because I was pregnant at the time. So I don't really know how much damage he had done to me, but they saw the marks on my neck. They knew he had choked me, and and I had multiple contusions on my head. So they knew that I had head damage. But so I had to go into like a protective custody home or whatever, and because I was so fearful to go back home that he might show up there, because his family immediately bailed him out of jail until his court date. So
I just want to say something real quick for people that's thinking, what is wrong with this girl? Because I know I've heard the judgment on me that, you know, she gets abused and then gets an abusive relationship. I think sometimes it's where we live, the culture of the area.
mhm,
And I grew up, I realize now, in this
mhm.
ridiculous hit culture where people right down the street may have never experienced any of that. You know, I'm not saying
Right.
it's everywhere, but there was a lot of
Woo! Sorry about
there was
that.
a lot of ignorant hillbillies
Well,
that this is how they all live.
my first husband was from Jersey, so I don't know what his excuse was,
Oh,
but
okay. Okay. Jersey.
but he, yeah, and he had only been in Florida for a few years, so he was very Jersey.
Okay.
But so I ended up going into this home that was like a protective home where you didn't know it was one of those kinds of homes. And I stayed there until I had the baby, and then still stayed there until about until she was about 6 months old. But so it was a home basically for pregnant girls that have went through trauma, and it was protected. So so in that home, it was a Christian based home. I began to go to church, and so I wasn't, you know, I did not go to church before that, so I just had a relationship with God that, you know, I assumed everybody had a relationship with God. You know, I didn't realize that there were other ways to be. And so one of the times that I went to church, I just felt this overwhelming feeling to just surrender my life to God. Like God had always been in my life, but I had not surrendered like my life. And so I surrendered my life, and I had the most powerful spiritual experience that I had ever had in my life. Like it's not even explainable. It was so powerful. And I literally saw like this veil, and I'm pretty sure it's the veil that I hear NDE's people talk about, but I saw this veil, and it literally lifted up over my eyes, and all of a sudden I could see crystal clear. And that's that. And I don't mean visually crystal clear, I mean spiritually crystal clear. I could see in to the spiritual realm like crystal clear now. There was no blinders. And it was such a powerful moment for me that I remember just I called everybody, I told everybody, anybody that I knew at that time. I was like, we have this veil over our eyes and we can't see, you know. And literally I lost every one of my friends at that time because they all thought I lost my mind. Like they thought I was crazy because I couldn't stop. It was such a powerful moment. And then literally 2 weeks after that experience, now I do want to add something to what I'm going to say right now. After I went through that experience with my husband at the time, um, there really wasn't too much medical attention that I could get, but I would have these moments constantly, like 2, 3, 4 times a day, where I would just like black out for a moment and come back. Like, and my equilibrium, is that what it's called? I was really off balance. I guess that's what it's called. Like I felt like I needed a V8 juice. You know, the commercial where they're leaned over. But I was constantly having blackouts throughout the day, every day, for all the way until even when I gave birth, I would just have blackouts. So I'm assuming that that must have been something that happened at that time. But so 2 weeks after surrendering my life to God, I went into my room. So I'm at this place called the Sunlight Home, and I went into this room that was my assigned room, and I literally I did nothing more than just sit on my bed and lean back. And when I did that, I instantly, like, the only way I can describe it is I fell out of my body. That's the only, it wasn't like an like an out of body experience where your body comes up out of you. Like I laid, just sat back like this on the bed, and I just fell out of myself, and I was instantly in what I called at that time heaven, because I didn't know what else it could have been. And in that place, that was one of the most powerful spiritual experiences, other than when I surrendered my life 2 weeks before that, because I was in the most beautiful place that is so undescribable. There, you would never, ever, ever be able to put human words to it, because it was so beautiful. The colors, like the colors of the grass and the trees and the flowers. And I had two beings that were walking with me. And as we're walking, we're just conversating, I'm just over the top amazed with how beautiful of the place it is, and how beautiful the place is. And I could see that there was a building off to the far corner, but what was most amazing to me is there was this brilliant white light, and that's the only way I can describe it. It was more beautiful than white, and it was huge, like right in front of me. Like it could have been like a mile away, but it was so big and it was so beautiful that I knew instantly that it was God. That's the only way that I can say. I knew that that was God, and all the light from that light was emanating through everything. Like it was in and through everything, like the flowers, the trees, the grass. And as I'm walking and I'm talking to these two beings, I noticed when I looked over my shoulder that we weren't casting a shadow. And I said, wow. I said, wow, we don't even cast a shadow here. This light's so bright. And they were like, yeah, there's no darkness here. And that's specifically what they said. There's no darkness there. And I was like, I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean there's no darkness? So I turned around and I literally cuffed my hand on the ground like this, and I peeked through the hole, and literally that brilliant light that was in front of me was so bright and emanating through everything that even cuffing my hand on the ground and looking through the hole, there was no darkness. It emanated through everything. And I didn't need to be asked if I wanted to go back in any kind of a way. I could not wait to get back to tell everybody. And it wasn't like I didn't have to speak those words. I just thought that in my head, and instantly I was transported back to my body. And now I'm back in the bedroom, and all I want to do is just get up and tell all the other girls that are in this home what just happened to me. And I don't know how much time passed by, because there definitely is no conception of time where you're at. There's no conception of time. So all I know is when I sat on the bed, it was still light out. And when I came back, it was now becoming dark. So I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to time even in time realm. So it might have been gonna be dark soon. I don't know. But so I got up so I can go tell these girls what had just happened to me. But the thing is that light that was there was all over me still. It was like I was in this bubble of light, and that's the only way I could describe it. That light came back with me when I came back, and I went to go speak to the girls, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't. I was like silenced. Literally, I could not speak, not one word out of my mouth. And I'm walking around the house, and I feel like these girls can see the light, because I can. It's so it's emanating all over me. I feel like everybody's seeing it, but nobody was seeing it. It was just me. And it took me several hours to get through, to get to, for that light to relax off of me or whatever. I don't know. And then I was able to speak. And of course, as soon as I could speak, I told every one of the girls there. I told the house mom. That's what the person that ran the home was called, the house mom. And I told everybody about my experience. And the sad thing about it is people, I guess more at that time, because more people are more responding better now, but at that time it wasn't taken well. Like people they didn't take it well. That's all I can say. They didn't. It was almost like they didn't believe what I was saying, and it was just the way that it was. And it didn't take long after that 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 I just didn't talk about it anymore, because I didn't realize it was something that you don't talk about because it's too out there. And but I was on fire. Like I was such a maniac back then because of those two specific experiences. I just wanted to go out and tell the whole world the truth, you know, because that was truth to me. What I experienced was truth. And I wanted, and I mean, I was such a maniac that the car that I owned at the time, I had, you know how people back in the day were putting like emblems across the windshield, like so like truck stomper or whatever, you know, they'd have words. My car said Jesus freak across the windshield. And
I
so
wanted to
when I
do
was,
that actually.
yeah, I it said Jesus freak, and I got that from one of the I think it was DC Talk. It was a Christian artist back in the day, and they had a song called Jesus freak, and I'm like, I'm putting that across my windshield, and I did. And so here I'm driving down the road and it just says Jesus freak, you know. And but I was out of control after that experience. Like there was
That's a good out
nothing.
of control, isn't it, though?
Yeah, well, the world doesn't really accept that kind of out of
And it
control.
doesn't have to. That's for us, isn't it? That's a
So
joy
it
for us.
right. So it did stifle me out a little bit. I will admit that. So anyway, so I want to move on because I had some more really powerful spiritual experiences after that. Um After I moved out of the Sunlight home, I moved into my own apartment, and it was like this little duplex, and my older brother rented one side of the duplex, and I had the other side of the duplex, and the duplex was on the property of the owner, so there was a house there too. And and at the house, behind the house was a swimming pool, and then there was a big huge fence that went around the entire property. So my daughter at that time was, you know, uh when this experience happened, she was about 8 months old, but when I moved there, she was about 6 months old, because I stayed at the Sunlight home until she was about 6 months old, and then I got my own place. And so I had a situation where my brother had come over one day, and he's just gabbing about some girl that he's wanting to date at the time. And I'm standing at the back door with the back door wide open, and my daughter's laying down taking a nap, and my little boy wanted to play outside, you know, in the yard behind me. So I was like, you know, as my brother's talking, I was like, okay, you know, go outside, stay right here, you know, in
What is
this
he, three
area.
or four?
He was 3. He had just it half he had just turned 3 in December, and this was March. So he was like 3 years and 3 months at the time. And so so as my brother's gabbing with me, I'm like really not wanting to be in this conversation with me, but at the same time I don't want to be rude to him or mean to him, because that's just what kind of a person I was. And thankfully my daughter started to cry because she was waking up from nap time, so it stopped our conversation abruptly. And I turned around to look outside to see what my little, I just basically looked over my shoulder because my door was wide open, and my 3-year-old was floating face first in the swimming pool. So it was immediately me and my brother ran out there. And I don't think I'm not sure if people realize this, but when a body fills up with water, my 3-year-old couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds, but it took both me and my brother to pull him out of the water. His whole body was full of water. And he just laid him in my lap. And my little boy was his lips were blue, his fingernails, like, he was pale white, and everything, eyelids, everything, fingertips, everything was blue. And the first thing that happened was my brother took off running. And I didn't know exactly why he took off running. I thought he took off running because he probably had like drugs or something on him, and he knew the police would be coming soon. So here I have my dead son in my arms. The first thing I check for is if he has a heartbeat. He had no heartbeat or no pulse, nothing like that. Not that I could detect. Like, I just put my head down on him and listened for a heartbeat, and there was no heartbeat. So I assume if there's no heartbeat, there's no pulse, because I didn't know how to do stuff. I didn't know how to check for a pulse. I just knew that there was no heartbeat. And so um what ended up happening to me is I didn't know how to do CPR because I never learned anything like that. So the first thing I did is I looked up, because immediately I just wanted to scream and get some of my neighbors, somebody neighbor-wise, to come and help. And where I lived at, neighbors were all around me. They were super close. It was a neighborhood. But when I looked up to scream, what ended up happening to me is there was some kind of like ripple effect. And how I describe it is when you're watching a scary movie and somebody is running down a hallway, and the hallway will just start extending farther and farther and farther, and you're just running, and you can't never make it to the end because it's extending so far. Well, that happens in real life, because that happened to me. And when I looked up, it looked like the neighbors were so far away that there was no way if I screamed that they would hear me. So immediately my next reaction was, the only thing I could think of was to look up to the sky and scream out to God with the most sincere heart that you could possibly have. And I just said, God, please show me what to do to bring my little boy back to life. And it was like instantaneously, I was in like the realm. I was there, but I was in a realm, because I heard, for the first time ever in my life, a audible voice that spoke to me. Now, I can't say for sure that it's God's voice, because all of our communication was telepathically. So I actually had never physically heard God's voice before. But this was a voice that I heard crystal clear, just like you and I speaking right now. And the voice just started telling me what I needed to do to bring my little boy back to life. So I'm following the instructions and doing it. And I don't know if people realize this, but when a body is filled up with water, when you breathe into their mouth, it's like you're breathing from a straw into a cup. So it's like you blow in and it's like blah, 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 you know? And I don't even know if I was doing it exactly right, but it didn't matter. Because as soon as I took my mouth off of him, water just started rolling out of his mouth. And it isn't, they just cough up a little bit of water. I'm telling you, water, like a water hose, just started blowing out of his mouth. Water was coming out of his nose. Water was coming out of his ears, and it was just rolling out. And the next thing the voice said to me is, okay, you need to put your hand on his chest, and you need to just do 3 pumps. 1, 2, 3, I'm like, and I'm like, okay, and I put my hand on his chest, and I just went 1, 2, 3. And as soon as I did that, his eyes opened up and rolled back into his head. And when they rolled back in his head, it scared the living daylights out of me. And instantly this other voice now on the other side said, "Up, he's dead now. He's gone. That's it. He's dead." And I lost it. Like, I literally lost it, and I started screaming and freaking out and just like lost complete control of myself. And I I didn't realize I was so out of control of myself. He was actually coming back alive. And but I was so out of control that I wasn't even seeing that. And what was so weird is when that other voice spoke those words to me, I literally felt the separation of this voice. And I can't describe that. I can't explain it. All I know, it was like, as soon as fear and panic came into me, it was like, what? And I was instantly now focused on this other voice that is telling me, that's it, he's dead, you've lost him. You know what I mean? And all panic and heck broke loose. I just lost control. And so what ended up happening is my brother went into the house and he called the ambulance, and I didn't know that. So as I'm out of control of myself, the ambulance pulls up, and as soon as I saw them, I jump up and I'm like, I'm just like out of control, and they're running over to help me. And by the time they had got there, he was already becoming, like, I wouldn't say like fully alert, but he was at least alive. You know what I mean? And they ended up helicopter flying him to the children's hospital, and did all the tests and everything on him, and he came back 100% like he had not even drowned at all.
Do you know if he
So
had
it was,
NDE?
I asked him when he was a child. So I'm just going to say this. I asked him when he was a child, did anything happen to you? Do you remember anything from when you died? And at that time he said no. But now in his adult life, he told me that he saw a black being. That's the only thing that he can say, is that he said he remembers going under the water. He remembers that it became instantly dark, and then he remembers seeing a black being. And and that's as far as it got, and that's all he can see. But I don't know why he didn't tell me that when he was a kid. And why he waited until he was an adult to tell me. But that's his thing, and just the way that it is. But he hasn't told me anything more than that. And I feel like if something did happen to him and he is being honest with me, I think there's more to his story. He's just not wanting to speak it right now. But so so everything turned out well with that experience. And I got my little boy back, and that was all that mattered. That was all that mattered. And the first thing I did is I called the Christian radio station at that time. It was 88.7 Way FM was our Christian radio station, because they were having some kind of phone-a-thon where people called in and donated money, because the radio station ran off of donations only. And you could call in and tell your story. Like, my story of what just happened with my little boy literally just happened that week, and they're doing it that weekend. So I called the radio station and I told them, I was like, and God spoke to me loud and clear, just like you and I are speaking. And I said, and then the devil tried to come in and he freaked me out. And I don't even know how I told the story, but I could tell you that when I stopped talking, it was like I could hear like the bugs creaking in the background. Like, everything went silent. I think I literally shocked these people. And it was like, it was live, so it wasn't like he could delete it. Everybody heard my story live on the radio about what just happened to me. And
Today it would
but
be just like, okay, just another story,
it,
We hear so many
it
now.
was an awkward silence, I can tell you that. Like,
Man, I
they were
imagine
like
that.
shocked with my story. But so as life went on, my spiritual experiences, especially once I surrendered, like, I always had the relationship. Like I said, I always communicated, but it wasn't until I actually surrendered my life into his hands that the spiritual experiences really became more profound for me. I knew that I was having, as a kid, I didn't know it was spiritual experiences. I assumed that was normal and everything went through it. But when I surrendered my life, my spiritual experiences were over the top. And I actually assumed that everybody was going through that, but I slowly learned that most of the people at the churches and stuff like that were not experiencing what I was experiencing. And it was so awkward. And I went from church to church to church, trying to find a church that was going through the experiences that I was going through.
And they're
Because
probably
most,
thinking, well, who is she? If those experiences were real, I would have them because I'm the perfect church going
right.
person.
Well, they started saying that the churches started saying that they were demonic experiences, and it
Of
was
course, because they
it
haven't had them.
was it was Satan showing up as an angel of light. And I eventually just couldn't go to church anymore because my spiritual experiences were so profound that I was not able to function in a church setting because I was not accepted, you
People that
know?
haven't had these experiences are not the best judge of what
Right.
these are.
Right. And there was no way somebody was going to make me think anything different. I knew that they were powerful, godly experiences because I was well aware of the
When they
devil.
save your son from drowning,
Hmm.
when they
Right.
save your soul through hard times and give you strength,
Yep.
they are not of the devil.
Right.
And I
Right.
really hate that they give the devil credit for something that God did
Hmm. Right. My whole
and
heaven
dismiss God.
experience, I mean, my whole heaven experience was so over the top, and it's like there is no way that I would be able to believe that that was something demonic and evil. I was very familiar with demonic and evil. There was no way.
Don't
But
you look back on your life and think, gosh, I wish I would have believed in myself and what I knew instead of what others thought? You
yeah,
know,
I depended. As bad as that might sound, my whole life I depended on what people thought about me,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't know how to think any other way. So I mean, later on as time went by, I just wanted people to know the truth, and that was my whole destiny was to for people to know the truth. And so I eventually went on the road. I left everything and I went on the road. And as I traveled on the road, I would have these powerful experiences just talking to strangers. And one of my experiences that I had, and this was one of the most powerful experiences, but when I would be in when I would be in conversation with like strangers, and it would become a spiritual conversation, what would happen to me is this energy would go from the top of my head and it would go through my entire body. And I knew that when that happened, words were about to come out of my mouth, and they weren't words that I had personally. Like I could never have a conversation like that on my own. Like I'm not that kind of a person. But these powerful words would come out of my mouth and it would like blow these people away. Like people would be in tears. Like I can't even explain it to you. But this one specific time that it happened to me, I had this guy and this girl, and my oldest, or not my oldest, I'm sorry, uh from my second marriage, I had one of my older sons with me. I think he was 15 at the time. And the whooshing feeling came over me, and and words started to come out of my mouth. But what ended up happening in this experience is my body, or my soul, I don't know what it was, but I separated from myself. So now I have me standing here, I have me standing here talking, and this me here, I could I could actually hear like fully what was coming out of my mouth. So it was like this whole three-dimensional thing. So the me standing here is, words are coming out of my mouth to the two people sitting here, and I'm watching myself, and it's like I'm like this, and I'm like, wow, that is so powerful. I'm having this whole conversation standing behind myself of how powerful the words are that are coming out of my mouth, and I could see that it's blowing them away, but I'm not concerned about it blowing them away. I'm blown away that I'm back here looking at myself and hearing these words that are coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And it was such a powerful experience, it really was. And that is something that, you know, depending on my situation and where I'm at, that will just happen to me. Like I know people talk about like meditation and doing this and doing that. I've never had control over what happens to me, and it happens at will. So
when
I
I first
never
started, when I first started hearing about people meditating and what they were trying to achieve, I thought, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Well, I love
people want that.
I
I'm trying
love
not
when
to
these
do that.
right. I love when the experiences happen to me, but the thing is I don't have control over it. It
Right.
has control over me, so it
Right.
can happen at any point at will, and and once I feel the whoosh come through my body, I know something's about to happen, and I just go with it.
Uh-huh.
Like whatever it is, I just go with it, and it's always a powerful spiritual experience, and that's all I can the only way I can describe it.
It
But
as being in our mind and in our body versus in our soul. And
right,
sometimes just
right,
like our soul's just like poof.
right. So so my next verbal experience that I had, I've only had two where I heard a verbal voice speak to me. This was just a couple years ago. And I had my boys out here in Colorado with me, my four boys from North Carolina. And we were all the way out in the desert area along the Rio Grande River, which is literally the border of New Mexico. And I had my boys for 3 months out here, and the whole time they were out there with me, I had to warn them every day nonstop. There's rattlesnakes, you got to watch for rattlesnakes, and you literally would see a rattlesnake daily. When I say rattlesnakes, I mean every day you're going to see a rattlesnake at least once, maybe twice. But there was this one specific rattlesnake that I warned them about. I said the ones that are the aggressive ones are the Mojave greens. You got to watch out for the Mojave greens because they're aggressive and they will chase you, you know. So we were spending our days hiking down the Rio Grande River and going swimming at the river. At least every other day we were going down to the river. And this one specific day, my kids were like begging me, can we go, Mom, can we go? And I was trying to get things together to bring down there, and they were just wanting to go. So I finally just gave in, because that's what kind of a mom I always was, is they just begged me and they got whatever they wanted, and they knew that. So I was like, all right, you guys can start walking, but I'll be right behind you. So they end up starting to walk, and they had made it around the corner where I couldn't see them anymore. So I just ran out of the RV, and I'm walking in that direction to catch up with them. And as I was walking, I heard a voice, just like with my son when he drowned, loud and clear, just like we're talking. And it said, your kids are going to get bit by a snake. And I instantly threw my hands up in the air, and I just started praying to God, protect my kids, don't let them get bit by a snake. And as my hands are up in the air, and as I am praying and walking to get to them, my son comes around the corner. He says, Mom, there's a rattlesnake, and it's a green one. And I took off running. I just took off running. I'm like, oh my gosh, a voice just told, I'm telling my kids, a voice just told me. And I was in the middle of praying when you came around the corner. And I'm like, oh my gosh, couldn't believe it. And it was a big, huge Mojave green, like literally laying right under, because I told my kids, I'm like, you got to watch underneath rocks. You got to watch the bushes because they'll be wrapped around the bushes and you won't see them. And this one was literally on the trail under this big, huge boulder that you have to walk past to go, start going down. It was literally right there. All my kids were up on these big boulders, like watching it down there. And so that was another like really powerful experience. And then my last experience and this is the last experience I'm going to talk about. It was actually a hell experience. Now, I don't know why I experienced this and why this happened to me at that time, but we were out on the property in North Carolina. My boys live on 16 acres of land in the middle of nowhere. And we were sleeping in my RV where I'm at right now. And me and my 11-year-old were up top. My 13-year-old was in this middle bed. And then my youngest son was in the back. I think he was 9 years old at the time. And my dogs just, it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and my dogs just start barking frantically. So of course my son up there, my son up there, and my son here woke up instantly because the door's right here. So the dogs are like freaking out. And so we're yelling at the dog, stop barking, because I knew it wasn't like a person or anything. The only thing it could have been is possibly an animal. And so the dogs are freaking out and freaking out. We can't get them to stop for nothing. So I literally, like, my bed is up at the top bunk here, but it's only like, I don't know, 3.5 feet from the floor here up. And so I didn't do anything more than just take my legs and put them over the edge because I was going to climb down and see what was outside that was making the dogs bark. And as soon as my legs dangled over the side, I literally felt this force. It was like a ripple effect type force because nothing physically touched me. Go like this. And my whole body, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, it flew off the bed like Superman. And when I flew off the bed, I instantly fell in this bottomless black pit. And my hands are just waving, just trying to grab onto anything. And I was falling really, really fast. And as I was falling, I had my toes like pointed down because I was just trying to touch the floor that was right there, and I'm not getting nothing. It's just this black bottomless pit and I was falling fast. So I was falling long enough to say in my head, when am I going to hit the floor? It's only right there. And as soon as I said that, I instantly came out of the black pit. My arm was behind me like this and hit the floor, and I broke both bones in this arm here. And I knew right away that my arm was broke. I jumped up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I broke my arm. Oh my gosh, I fell in a bottomless black pit. And the dogs are still barking. They didn't even budge. Like, they're still frantically barking. So I tell my son in the bed that's right here where I'm sitting, it folds down to a bed or it can be a couch and a table. And I tell my son, give me a flashlight, so he hands me a flashlight, and broke arm and all, I bust out the door and I shine the flashlight, and I literally shined all the way around in a circle. If there was an animal, you'd see like shiny eyes. I scooted down, I shined underneath my RV. There was nothing out there. And the only thing that I could think of that could have possibly been going on is whatever that entity was that was in this RV, my dogs were well aware of it, and that's what they were barking at. That's the only thing that way I could wrap my head around what that whole activity was. You know what I mean? And then I had a whole slew of things that happened after that, but I'm not even going to go into that because I was so traumatized. The trauma, I had so much PTSD from falling into that bottomless black pit that it took me a very long, because that was 3.5 years ago. It's actually, what month are we in now? Yeah, it
Okay.
was 3.5 years ago exactly that happened. And it took me probably a good, I want to say, 2 years of the PTSD from falling in that bottomless black pit. Like, it was so horrible. My body, my mind would just return to that bottomless black pit, and I would have a full all out panic attack, and I had no control over it, like, for a long time. So
What
thankfully
made
now
you
I'm
go
over
ahead?
it.
What made you start traveling in your RV, and when did that start?
um well, I have been married 3 times, and all 3 marriages were horribly abusive. So once I got out of my third marriage, I left everything. I sold all of my stuff. I lived in a beautiful condo in Naples, Florida, Southwest Florida, right down the road from the beach. And I had everything you could possibly have as a functioning human. And I left. That was the last straw. Shortly after I left, and I didn't have the RV at that time. I only had my car. So we were living in my car. And I sold everything, and I was like, I'm never ever going back to this world. You know what I mean? I had just had it. Like, it wasn't just childhood trauma, it was trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, and it just never ended. And the only way that I could think of of getting out of this trauma was leaving everything, and secluding myself basically away from all of this. You know what I mean? And it wasn't too long after, I think I was traveling with just my car and just camping out in national forest and stuff, in tents and stuff. I think that lasted about a couple years, and I got my first RV. And the thing was is God told me, I have an RV coming for you. I had to have told at least 100 people in my travels, I have an RV coming. I don't know how I'm going to get it. I don't know where it's going to come from, but God told me I have an RV coming. So there's an RV coming. I just don't know where it's going to come from or how I'm going to get it. And sure enough, I had met some people that were traveling too, and we were doing like random acts of kindness for people. And we stumbled on this elderly lady that needed a new roof on her house. And so me and one other person went up there and ripped all the whole roof off and threw it off, like boards and everything all off. And we worked together, and we put a new roof on this lady's house. And her brother caught wind of it and was like, hey, I heard you guys helped my sister out and put a new roof on. And I also heard through the grapevine that you were interested in an RV. And he was like, well, I got one for you. And literally, it was exactly what God showed me. This first RV was exactly the visual that I had. And he gave it to us. He gave it to us because he was so thankful that we did what we did for his sister. And so I had that RV first, and then it was about a year later the engine blew, and there was just no saving it. It needed to be just parted out at that point. And so I signed over the title to the mechanic, and literally as soon as I signed the title over to the mechanic, God told me instantly, I have another RV for you. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know where it's gonna come from or how I'm gonna get it, but God told me. And my childhood, or not childhood, but my adult, but she was still kind of a child at the time because she's 3 or 4 years younger than me. She was up there with me when it happened, and as soon as I turned around from
Wait a minute,
signing the
who's 3 or 4 years
title,
younger than you? I missed something.
just this girl that I was friends with at
Oh,
the
okay,
time from
okay, gotcha.
Florida, and she came up there to see if she could try to work on my RV to help me out. And there was just no fixing it. And so she was standing there when I signed over the title, and when God spoke to me and said, "You have another RV coming," I instantly turned to her and I was like, "God just told me I got another RV coming." And I'm like, "I don't know where it's gonna come from, but I got another one coming." And literally 4 months later, I got another RV and given to me, and that's the RV that I'm in now, and I've been in it. It's been, I think it's been like, it'll be 5 years this year in October that I've had this RV.
Now,
And
how did you do this with 8 kids?
well, my 4 boys stayed in North Carolina with their dad, and my other kids were already adults. So the
Okay.
only one that has traveled full time with me is my youngest son, which when I first left and all that crap happened with his dad, he was only 2.5 years old. So when I went on the road, he had just turned 3 years old. So he's been traveling with me since he was 3 years old. And he's been my traveling companion the whole time. You know, that kid he's the kid that I am definitely the closest to. And and he has my back like 100%. Like
What are you
we
doing?
have
Homeschooling on the road?
I homeschool.
That's convenient, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. He's never went to the school system, and there's a big difference when my other 4 boys were homeschooled too. They were in the public school for, for the first portion of their schooling years, but I begged grandma and their dad to pull them out and put them and homeschool them, and they did. And they went from being like these gangster talking kids to completely polite and well behaved and good kids, and realizing that they were going down some really bad roads. But my son, he's sleeping up top there, and he'll sleep through anything. He slept through when I fell in the bottomless black pit. He didn't even budge. And but he's been homeschooled his whole life, so he's completely, like, he is so well behaved. Like, I never, ever, ever have to discipline him. He is the most respectful kid. He would never do anything to hurt me. He would never, like, he is so good. And that's the only thing that I could say is all my kids are good. Okay. All my kids are good. But AJ is definitely different. And I've got to be with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. and and I'm so thankful for that, because I really believe that moms should be with their children, because it really does make a difference. And and because he's got to be with me, he's different. He's a good kid, he's respectful, he's very polite. Like, I can't even explain it.
Yeah. I wish we had more time. I got another
I know
guest and I
it's
give this a
time. I'm
file so I don't
My
make her
phone's
late
gonna
like I
die
had you
soon
late that
too.
day.
Yeah. Right. So
I'm glad you come
thank
back.
you.
And is there anything else that we didn't get to cover you wanted to cover?
No, I hit everything off my list because I wrote a list so I wouldn't forget. And I hit everything. Like, I'm just thankful that we got to do it again, so that people know. I'm now, for the first time, I'm going through counseling, and I'm seeing a therapist for the first time. And I'm going through the process of trying to process everything. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I've been seeing a therapist for about 8 months now. And uh, now that I'm talking about things, like I've talked to you about it and stuff, I do feel like, healing is coming to my spirit. I just can't figure out how I'm all of a sudden gonna forget about all this.
Right.
I don't know.
And I just want to say real quick that your twin brothers, after witnessing all the abuse of you and
Hmm.
your brother, ended up in prison for being abusive, to say it
Right,
mildly.
right.
And if people get anything out of this is,
Hmm.
um, even though the ones aren't being abused, there's ones watching and they're
Hmm.
affected.
Right,
And
right,
people need
right.
to think about what's happening to their kids.
Yes, I agree 100% because even if you're not getting damaged, just sitting and watching the damage is going to damage you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I
so
appreciate
thank
you,
you.
Tammy. You stay in
Thank
touch,
you. Thank
okay?
you, Peggy.
Okay. Talk to me later, all right?
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.